Welcome to the podcast. While younger age groups tend to be more familiar with technology and the internet than their older counterparts, the digital gap between generations has been narrowing drastically over the past decade. However, despite the increase of older Americans who use the internet, most websites, apps, and digital devices are not designed to accommodate their wants and needs. In this podcast, we discuss ways your organization can make sure your digital platforms are inclusive to all age groups.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Janice Kleins, Marketing Manager for AOE, and today we're exploring the importance of designing for an aging population. Did you know that over a third of the U.S. population is aged 50 or older, yet many digital platforms aren't optimized for their needs, such as changes in vision, motor control, hearing, and cognition? With us today is Lindsay Chalf, AOE's Director of Design, to help us navigate how to design for an aging population. Welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, Janice.
So let's dive right in. Why is designing for an aging population important?
So while younger age groups tend to be more familiar with technology and the internet than their older counterpart, there's what's called a digital gap between generations that's been really narrowing over the past decade. And that just means there's an increase in older Americans who have access to technology like smartphones, who use the internet, who are more digitally literate than older generations in the past have been, and so on. But despite this increase in use, most websites, apps, and digital devices aren't designed to accommodate this demographic's wants and needs, and things are geared towards younger generations. But like you said, more than a third of the US population is at least 50 years old. And as that number is going to increase over the years, so will the percentage of users who may experience age-related changes to vision, motor control, hearing, and cognition. It's important to design for this demographic, not just because it's the right thing to do. You want to enable everyone to access information and experience content regardless of ability, but also because if you don't design for this age group, you're neglecting a huge segment of your audience, and that's going to impact your business without a doubt.
For sure. You don't want to leave out anybody.
Mhm.
So what challenges do older adults face on digital platforms?
AOE recently reviewed a survey that was conducted for older Americans on their digital experiences, and there are some big hurdles that they mentioned encountering on websites and mobile sites. And I think the top one was text that's hard to read, whether it's too small, the contrast was too low between the text color and the background color, things like that. A lack of clarity, such as mystery icons that don't clearly represent what they're supposed to symbolize. Think of the ones that are now standard in society. If you see an envelope icon in a website, that generally means, click it and you can email someone. But then you get some websites who try to think outside the box and get a little too creative with symbols and end up confusing users. So it's a form over function issue when functionality really should be the top priority. Another hurdle is like a lack of usability. So again, most websites are designed with younger generations in mind. So small clickable targets like links or buttons may be easy for a younger user to see, but difficult for someone who might be experiencing age-related vision issues. And then some people also mentioned difficult controls, like having to click and drag an element on a website. You see these issues more with mobile sites, like double tapping, having to do a pinching and spreading gesture to enlarge an image, for example, swiping in a path that isn't a straight line. So users with mobility issues may struggle with those features.
All right. I know I struggle with some of the features, especially reading. So aside from following general accessibility and universal design standards, what else can be done to accommodate the needs of this older demographic?
The best place to start is by inviting older members of your team to be involved in the design process of your website or any other digital material you're creating, at least to give it the eye check, test it out before you release it to a general audience. A lot of designers are younger and aren't aware of usability issues that older users may experience. So adding that new perspective to the design process will ensure that your end product will be accessible by a wider audience. You had mentioned universal design standards, and obviously those guidelines are what we all want to follow, but it's important to remember that their recommendations are considered the bare minimum of accessible and universal design. One example I like to use is when you're laying out a website and you have clickable or tappable icons in a row, say your social media icons on the bottom of your page. It's recommended that you space them out at least 44 pixels apart to avoid any accidental interactions like mistakenly clicking one when you want to select the other. The key phrase there was at least 44 pixels. So that's the absolute minimum, but creating like a wider space between the icons would be going above and beyond for your users, which is always appreciated. I mentioned earlier, a lot of users in the older demographic mentioned difficulty with website designs that lacked clarity in their visuals. So you want to avoid anything that's abstract, that's intended to provide contextual information or to help users navigate your interface. And the same goes for the language you use, which should be straightforward and professional so that it's understandable by the widest possible audience. When designing a mobile site, you want to make sure that the gestures required for navigation are easy to perform, like natural hand motions, tapping, swiping horizontally, vertically, diagonally in a straight line. You want to avoid gestures that require two hands or coordination of two fingers, like the pinch and spread movement. Anything that requires extremely precise movement, like those menus that you have to tap and then drag open to navigate, are very frustrating, even for younger users. And then finally, you want to provide clear instructions or contextual tips on your website. Younger users don't really mind exploring a website to figure it out, but older users tend to feel more comfortable knowing exactly what their taps and clicks are doing. For example, a link should say contact us via email instead of hit us up, or something that might be universally understood.
Gotcha. Sorry, I'm still thinking about hit us up. Does AOE advise on this topic?
We have quite a few blogs and a podcast episode or two on digital accessibility. If you've read or listened to those, you may recognize the issues that I covered today as ones that individuals with disabilities also encounter. I like to use that curb cut effect example, where curb cuts or ramps that were originally designed for people in wheelchairs, but have also proven useful to people pushing strollers or riding bicycles, rolling luggage, and much more. And so what that equates to in terms of the world of design is that when you design for those with accessibility needs, everyone benefits. And that same lesson applies to design for older adults. So no matter their age, your users are going to enjoy attractive and efficient design that they can actually use. It's also important to remember that there's no need to sacrifice aesthetics for functionality. Just because your website is accessible and usable by everyone doesn't mean that it has to be ugly by any means. When you follow those accessibility guidelines and universal design standards, your final product will not only look nice, it will be nice to use as well.
No, I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Lindsay, for joining us today and discussing this important topic with our audience. For those of you listening, we do offer a number of blogs and we do have a podcast on digital accessibility. We have all that stuff linked in the podcast description for you. You can also visit our website at aoeteam.com and you find all that information there under the resources tab, under blogs and podcast. Thank you, Lindsay, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Janice.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope this session provides value, and we hope you will join us for our next podcast.